Does Fort Worth ever cross her mind? I trust it does. She represents it in Congress, represented it as mayor. When I got here, Kay Granger was the mayor of Fort Worth. The road we have both traveled. Kay, welcome. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing great. Good to talk to you, Mark. It's been a long time.
It has indeed. It is so nice to have you. Listen, I've got a bunch of stuff to talk about your past few years and where we are now. But first, let's talk about yesterday, because the House Republicans went to the floor of the House with a resolution of disapproval against Nancy Pelosi's tactics, the ripping of the speech. Tell me what that was, and you were the person who delivered it. What was the content of that resolution?
It's called a privileged resolution, which means it states that her actions were a breach of decorum and brought discredit to the House. Because it's a formal notice of disapproval, because it's a privileged resolution, that means the Speaker will be required to bring it to the floor for a vote, and that was what was important. Nancy Pelosi began with her introduction when she omitted the words high privilege and distinct honor, which has always been a tradition.
Yeah.
But when she tore up her copy of the speech, the official, what we understand is the official House record of remarks, then that said to me, that needs to be, everyone needs to be aware of it and say that she's not just the Speaker of the Democrats, she's the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember John Boehner introducing Obama. I remember Newt introducing Clinton. I remember Tip O'Neill introducing Reagan. I mean, of speakers of the opposite party, and they still afforded the sitting president the basic dignity befitting the event. In today's Democrat Party, is that just gone?
It is, and that was why it was so important to make sure people understood that. And you're exactly right. Speaker Ryan, Speaker Boehner, they may have disagreed with the president on a multitude of issues, but they treated him with respect. So can you imagine the outrage if they had acted this way toward President Obama? What Nancy Pelosi did was shameful. It degraded the proceedings of the joint session. And the other thing, Mark, that was so important, the president brought those wonderful heroes, those wonderful stories of people that were there in the audience. And when she tore that up, it was a slap in the face to those heroes and their families that the president had honored.
Yeah, because those words were on those pages. I don't
they
know.
Were.
So let's expand this out. How do you think impeachment plays out? President Trump seems unfazed by it. We'll learn more about that in a couple of hours. I don't want to overstate the degree to which it blew up on Democrats. I said it would backfire, and I believe it did. But come November, isn't impeachment largely forgotten, and people are sort of voting on whether they like or don't like President Trump or Republicans in general?
I think there's a real misunderstanding of what people think of this president. And he last night in his speech, he went over all the things that have happened in the economy, the unemployment, the incomes are rising, the poverty and welfare rolls are falling, millions of jobs have been added, Americans of all backgrounds are thriving, workers are coming off the sidelines. It's interesting last night, all the women that were in white, they were in white in solidarity to the women's suffrage movement, but refused to applaud President Trump when he said clearly that women filled over 70% of all new jobs created last year. So people remember that, and they're living through it, and they have jobs that they didn't have. They have more financial security, and people will remember that when they go to vote.
Yeah, and much is made of Trump and women and the Republican Party, et cetera, and the relationship that voters have with the president. Let's spend a moment on the relationship you have with the president, because it has been a pretty amazing thing to behold politically. Your affinity for him is pretty obvious. His affinity for you is wrapped around every ad, where I think it was at the rally at the AAC, where he showed enormous respect and love for you. What's the root of that? I think I know that. Well, go ahead, because I think I got a clue. A lot of it is about military spending, which is so vital to you. But just riff on that for a minute, and then I got a couple more.
The military spending, when I came into Congress, I was asked, now you've been elected, what path are you going to run on? And I said clearly, I want to make sure that every year that I'm in Congress, I help keep our nation safe and support our military with the best training and the best equipment in the world. President Trump is exactly there. So when I chaired Defense Appropriations. When I write a bill having to do with that, I never have to check and see if the president's going to support it. He is right there 100% all the time. The other thing is the border, and I got involved in protecting our border in 2014 when John Boehner was Speaker, and I started watching these literally thousands of children that were coming across our southern border, brought by what we call coyotes, paid people. And I went to Speaker Boehner and said, Mr. Speaker, there's something very serious happening, and I think that you should put a staffer to follow it, a committee to follow it. Instead, he put me to follow it. And I went to the border, understood what was going on, came back, reported, went back to all with those three countries. And so when President Trump came in and said, we need to secure our border, I said, I'm there. And I've been there. No one has been more active in supporting our border and building the wall than me.
Would it be true, because you got a lot of company in this regard, that back in the heat of 2015 and 16, President Trump might not have been your number one candidate, but he showed you something through the military and border stuff. He showed you enough devotion to things that are vital to you that was the path that you took to an alliance that is defined by those issues and now even more.
It's true. And President Trump, and people say they don't want to like him, so they ignore the fact that he says he's going to do it, and by gosh, he gets things done. I mean, he's doing things that really should have been done years ago, and have concerned me for a long time. But he steps up every single time. One of my favorite lines in his speech when he gave was said, "The only victories that matter in Washington are victories of the American people." I loved that. I said, that is so true, and he never forgets that. He gets it done. He keeps his promises.